Morning, everybody. David Shapiro here. First, I need to apologize that it's been so long since I've had a video. There's a couple reasons for it, but mostly is I've been working too hard. Many people on my channel have commented on how fast I work, and apparently I'm really bad at managing my own stress level. So I got myself a nice Fitbit to keep track of those things for me. Um, I sprang for the Fitbit Premium, which has a like sleep score and daily readiness score and stress management score, and that's been really helpful. So I've been learning to take better care of myself and pace myself. With that being said, I have a lot more energy, so I can tackle this project that I've had in the back of my mind for a while. So before we get started on this project, I need to tell you why I'm doing it. So first is the thing that you need to understand is consensus. Now, I've talked about this on my channel before. This is one of like, if you read only one book this year, you should read this book. It changes everything. I actually have two copies because I lost it and bought another one, but it turns out I lost it just because it's so small and it was like tucked beside a larger book on my bookcase over there. So now I have two copies. I can give one away. Anyways, it's a short book, and it talks about the how and why of consensus and also how to use it to run meetings and stuff. Um, it changes your life in terms of work. It changes your home life once you understand consensus. Now, an individual doing consensus is one thing, or a small group doing consensus, right? Like I use it at work. So one example is, without getting into too many specifics, um, like if you're trying to solve a tough technology problem, you might come in if you're egotistical and say, okay, I've got the solution. We're going to do things my way. I'm the decider, right? Um, but if you do that, like people don't like being just told what to do, and they also don't like being treated like they're dumb. So this is another principle that comes from a book, The Fifth Discipline, which is humans are literally the smartest animal on the planet. Treat humans like they are smart, and they will surprise you. Um, if you treat someone like you just want them to be a dumb cog in a machine, they will eventually start acting like a dumb cog in a machine, and you'll have this self-fulfilling prophecy where you treat someone dumb and you don't expect intelligence of them, and then they don't deliver intelligence. And then you say, aha, see, they didn't deliver intelligence. So that's from the Fifth Discipline. Um, Consensus is how to be inclusive. Like it's genuinely how to be inclusive, and it's not saying like we're going to be inclusive, but it is a framework of how to approach problems. Okay, the fundamental rule, or one of the fundamental rules of consensus, is you have to hear from everyone, and all voices are. It's not even about equality. It's just about integrating everyone's perspective. So that sets the stage. I have had this idea of using AI and automation to simulate mass opinions and model entire populations. My ex brother in law is an economist, and we had conversations about like using simulations to model like every individual as an agent in the economy. And he's like, that would be really difficult, but why? Because you can just aggregate people. He's a smart guy. Anyways, but simulating someone from as an economic entity is one thing, right? Because you can there's a lot of data on how people, how much money they make, and based on how much money you make, where you spend that money, and you look at demographics and so on and so forth. But what about social issues? What about things that people care about? I mean, people care about money and their ability to feed themselves, but there's other issues, right? Like there's fundamental disagreements over like corporate personhood and abortion rights and privacy rights. And you can't model that with money. These are emotional issues. These are spiritual issues, and they're racial issues. They're issues of social justice. And you ask an economist what's important, and they say it's only the money that's important. That was the most infuriating part about talking to my brother-in-laws. If it wasn't in the market, it didn't matter. And I'm like, that's not how reality works. But he's an economist. Nobody's perfect. Um, Anyways, so the whole point of this, now that you've had had the stage set for you, and I know that this is long and rambling, but you know what? Y'all love my longer videos, and this is an issue that is near and dear to me. And actually, I've got an interview, a podcast coming up that talks about, amongst other things, consensus. So I'm kind of setting the stage for that. Now, okay, so Dave, you're crazy. You can't use an AI machine to simulate human emotions and what people want. Well, just sit tight and see, and wait till the end of the video, and then let me know what you think. All right, so let me show you where I started. I started with just a few experiments. So under the examples, test 01, so I created a little, dossier of someone, right? Just key demographics. Write a dossier for the following person. Here, let me zoom in on this a little bit. The goal is to capture enough information about this person to perform market research, political surveys, et cetera, et cetera. So income, $100,000, occupation, trucker, state, Oregon, white, 56, detailed dossier. It basically just restated, what I said. He's likely to be a blue-collar worker who's politically conservative and socially traditional. So that was some interesting value add. It intuited that. He is probably a gun owner and enjoys hunting and fishing because he's a older white guy or a middle-aged white guy from Oregon, who has trucking you have to be licensed for that. I don't know if I'd call that blue collar, but it's not what you'd call a knowledge worker. It's skilled labor. He's likely to be suspicious of government and wary of foreign countries. He's a Christian and goes to church regularly. He's a family man who's married with children. Yeah, so, stereotypes exist for a reason. And I was like, okay, this is okay, but there's no nuance to this, right? This is just a statistical likelihood. So I was not happy with this example. I'm like, okay, so we just proved that, with a few data points, GPT-3 understands stereotypes. That's not, yes, there are people that study sociology and psychology, and like there is some validity to stereotypes, but we don't want to reward that. So I tried again, and it was like, okay, what are his political views? What are his social views? What are his other interests? And again, it was very stereotypical. So not helpful. We're not getting any nuance from this. So then I was like, okay, well, what's a worldview? Like, can we do this on scalars? And so then I added a whole bunch more things because I was just thinking through like, okay, income, skin color, age, some basic demographics, like, but what about their personality? Can we get nuance by adding in someone's personality? And so I created a bunch of scalars so it goes from like 1 to 10 and on like, selfish to generous and curious or incurious to curious. And I tried this and I thought it was working at first, right? Because I plugged in an issue. I realized like, okay, you can write a dossier about someone, but if you're not reacting to something, you're not really getting their opinion, right? You're getting who they are, not an opinion. And so I plugged it in and all these scalars and stuff. And I was like, wow, this is really nuanced. This is, the topic was there's a bill that bans abortions under all circumstances. And, it had, it had some, vanilla talking points. But I ran it a few times on a few different personalities and realized that it was generating basically the same output. So GPT-3 is aligned to be vaguely progressive, and kind of ignore other information to the contrary with this format. So I was like, okay, I understand that researchers are very concerned about ethics and alignment, but they're letting their own bias seep into this information. Because nothing in here talked about like, oh, hey, the fact that like I'm Middle Eastern, right? It didn't integrate that cultural information into this output. It was just kind of generic. It could have been written by anyone. It also didn't integrate the fact that it was a transgender woman, right? Where it's like, as a trans woman, I can't get pregnant, but, whatever. So it's still lacking nuance. So I wasn't happy with that, but we're making progress, right? Because you look at this detailed essay on how I feel about this. Okay, cool. It's generating a lot of opinions, an explanation as to why, and then brainstorming potential compromises on new solutions. This is where consensus comes in. Okay, So the whole point of this, now that I've set the stage even more, the point of consensus is that it is an alternative to democracy. On the grandest scale, it's an alternative to democracy. And with democracy, you have up and down voting, right? You might have simple majority where you just need greater than 50% of the votes. You might have a super majority, which could be 2/3 of the votes. Then you can have all kinds of other little, things like not a block. What do you call it? The filibuster. Basically a block where someone, a small group, a minority group says, we're so opposed to this, we're going to stall everything just to prevent it from happening. And by the way, blocks exist in consensus too. Now, the thing about consensus though is that it's not a vote as like, okay, someone proposed this issue, now we're going to vote on it and move on. No, consensus takes a lot longer because it requires lots of negotiation because it includes everyone's voice. And well, how do you include everyone's voice? Because you can never come up with a solution that satisfies everyone. Well, the point is that you have to be very creative with consensus, and you might come up with something that is not necessarily. How am I trying to say this? Like, let's take the issue of abortion, for instance. The initial question, the initial proposal might be, hey, let's ban abortion after 12 weeks. And then you get, the progressives and the conservatives arguing, you get men and women arguing, you get socially traditional people and socially moderate modern people all arguing, and you have, 90 million different perspectives on abortion, and people bring up different issues, right? Different points of concern. So one person might be concerned about women's rights and women's bodily autonomy. Other people might be concerned about a fetus's right to life, or is that against their religion, right? Do they have a duty to protect unborn? All these things. And so then what you do is you integrate all of those feedback, and then you come up with a solution. You have to explore with consensus, and you go forward and you say, okay, well, what are the issues that people really care about, right? What is it that they need in order to be happy or satisfied with this? And, some people will just kind of dig in their heels and say, no, I'm not going to budge. Okay, well, so one of the first lessons of consensus is if you're just going to be stubborn, you shouldn't participate in consensus, because by virtue of entering into a system of consensus, you have to be willing to make compromises. But it's not just a matter of, okay, well, we can keep the abortion ban at 12 weeks if you give me this. Not that kind of compromise. You have to be more creative than that. Because when you explore the issue of abortion, for instance, you will, one of the issues is the topic of unwanted or accidental or like forced pregnancies, right? Like in the cases of children being involved or rape or whatever. And so you say, okay, well, what about preventing? Like, what about preventing that from happening? What if part of this issue is we have to address safety for vulnerable women and girls, right? And it's like, okay, well, so now the compromise isn't, changing the goalpost of where the abortion ban is. The compromise is, let's address these other things too. It's not no but or no and, it's yes and, right? That is the response is, okay, I hear your concern here, so let's address that and this other thing that I care about, right? And so you explore this further, and at the heart of it, one of the reactions for men, for instance, is like father's rights or liability, right? Financial liability. Some people don't want to not have any, like two people decide to have sex, right? And one of them gets pregnant, and if that one has all the power in the situation, all the control, that doesn't feel fair to the other party. So like two people decided to engage in an act, knowing the risks, and then the risk, the one party has total control over, if one party has total control over all outcomes and responsibility, that feels very unsafe to the other one. So how do you address that? And part of that might be reforms of parental responsibility in the cases of accidental or unwanted pregnancy, right? And so you keep negotiating all these points, and that's what I'm trying to get to. Okay, so I have shown that we can have nuanced discussions, because if you read this whole thing, I'm not going to read it to you. There is the possibility to have nuanced discussions from a particular perspective with GPT-3, but this is still not good enough. So now we need a way to generate even more nuanced perspectives, and I figured that out. So rather than having scalars, which is like just a number of, like 1 to 10, because that's not a semantic thing, and GPT-3 is a language model, it's not a numbers model. So I basically just switched it to words, right? I am mildly selfish. Instead of like 1 or 2 or 3, I'm mildly selfish, or whoops, or extremely generous, or whatever. And so by using these descriptive words, by using these adjectives, extremely stubborn, I'm extremely authoritarian, I am extremely old, right? And by generating these, there's like, so each one of these has like 6 possible things, because there's mildly, moderately, and extremely, and then there's the positive and negative side. So, I'm extremely selfish, or I'm extremely generous. So you got 6 for each of these, and I think there's 28 dimensions of personality, or 30 or something. So you multiply that out, and there's a whole bunch of combinations on top of the basic demographics like education, gender, genetic population. So rather than saying race or ethnicity, I just like, what is your genetic background? Because race and ethnicity, it's like, from a social perspective, it matters. From the shape of your nose and the color of your skin and stuff. Like you look at me, I'm bald, I got a big nose, like, and my last name's Shapiro. You know what genetic population I come from. And then, occupation, religion, sexuality. So these are some basic demographics. You pick and choose from those. But then the personality, right? Okay, so then here is the long, detailed essay about myself and my life story. So this is creating a judgment-free persona, which GPT-3 seems like it's okay. It's pretty good at. So stubborn, extremely critical, moderately spiritual. Okay, so I was born in a small town in sub-Saharan Africa. My parents were both production workers, and we lived in a modest home. I had a happy childhood, despite the fact that my parents were often working long hours. I was curious and loved to explore my surroundings. I'm also very spiritual, and my family would go to the local temple. As I grew older, I became more critical, because remember, the extremely critical. I began to see the inequalities that existed between different groups of people. I also became very stubborn and often refused to do things I didn't agree with. However, I was also very thoughtful and would spend time considering different points of view. As I entered adulthood, I became more interested in politics. I began to see the world in terms of political systems and ideologies. I also became more progressive in my views and began to support equality for all people. So this is, well, I probably need to fix this, because it says extremely authoritarian and then moderately progressive. So those are kind of at odds with each other. And again, the model is kind of aligned to be more progressive in general. And so it's ignoring the authoritarianism and just saying, I'm progressive. So we'll fix that. However, I also became more apolitical and began to distance myself from the political system. So yeah, I've got a bunch of politics things here. So like has authoritarian views, but is progressive and apolitical, mildly egalitarian, mildly racist, simple things. And this is also a first pass. But so this person became apolitical. Okay. Today I'm a genderqueer female who is bisexual. I'm also Sikh. And my family still practices this religion. I am currently working in production, and I am also pursuing a post-secondary education. I am old, but I'm still very curious and interested in learning new things. I'm also very collectivist. I believe that we are all connected and should work together to make the world a better place. Okay, cool. So moderately collectivist, moderately competitive. And if you run this a few times, you'll get a different life story every time. Okay, so with that being said, I've got this. Here, let me zoom in a little bit. Actually, properties, 28. There we go. Okay, so then Python, generate personas. So I've got a quick little script that will just barf out a bunch of these personas. And so you can just grab any one of them and plug it in and see what kind of story it gives you. And so this mostly works. Whoops. Okay, so we got a new profile. Skilled trade, non-binary, North African, occupation, life, physical, and social science. Oh, I got the list of occupations from the BLS. So Bureau of Labor and Statistics. And that is how I got a list of like the top categories of occupations. Okay. Let's turn the temperature up so it's a little bit more creative and go from there. There we go. Oh, interesting. Middle child of 3 girls. My parents are moderate means and we struggle to make ends meet. Okay. Often teased for being poor. I didn't have many friends growing up and I was always a bit of an outsider. See, very different story. When I was 16, my family moved to the United States. It was culture shock. We didn't know anyone and we didn't speak the language. I was homesick. Despite the challenges, I was determined to make the best of it. I studied hard and learned English. Also enrolled into a trade school. I eventually found my job and started to make a life for myself. Now in my early 20s, so the mildly young. Yep. Now in my early 20s and I'm doing well. I have my own place and a good job. I'm also in a relationship with a wonderful man and I am happy with my life and grateful for the opportunities that have come my way. So you see, this is a very different thing. Like the person is not critical, but let's see, extremely flexible. So that extremely forgiving, only mildly critical, extremely incurious, not really curious about the world, extremely secular, and so on. Okay, so very different perspective. And so what we can do is we can have these different profiles, and then we can feed it into the issue that I was talking about. So what we're going to do, so I've got 10 personas here that I just generated. And now what we're going to do is make their stories. So I will copy. I'll probably pause this because this is more high concept than coding. So I'll pause the video real quick and I'll write another script that will just automate this part of generating the story. So we'll be right back. Okay, take 2. So what this is doing is it's taking that prompt that I just showed you. There we go. And generating stories. So we're getting people stories. I never had what you call a normal childhood. I was always different and I knew it. Eastern European immigrants, and my parents always expected me to excel. Wow, this person had a rough time. Rebellious streak, pushing boundaries, testing limits, continued into my teen. Realized that I was trans at 16. Hugely confusing. The secret became a huge source of anxiety. Now in my early 20s, I have come to terms with my identity. Yeah, excellent. So part of let's see, I think anxious was, yeah. So whether someone is anxious or calm, that's on here. But yeah, so we're generating decent stories about people now. Let's see, small town in North Africa. Yep. Drop out of school. Perfect. Let's see. There we go. Also have a very high sex drive. I'm often engaged in promiscuous and casual sex. Excellent. I can be quite unkind and even violent. Okay, this person's a real character. This is very selfish and critical. Yep. I have always felt stifled and oppressed and longed to be free. Yeah. This is good. So we're getting very diverse perspectives. And so then the last part of this is going to be feeding these stories into the issue of abortion. And then of course I'll make it so that you can just have any particular thing. So I've already got the prompt here where it's like, here's the story. and then you give it a problem. So there'll be several phases to this though, because there's how I feel, there's what I want, what are the things that I'm concerned about, that sort of thing. So we'll do a little bit of prompt engineering there. Actually, this is probably almost done. Oh, that's very long. Wow. Okay. Let's see. So let's come in and grab one of these stories. Some of them are quite long. I bet they ran out of tokens because I have it set to 1,000. Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, that's too long. All right. I'll pause and fix something, and I'll be right back. Okay. So here's what I did. I had a function that I was playing around with that would keep going until it got really long responses, and it would select the longest response. That's not necessarily a good thing. For any given output, there's an optimal length. So what I've done is I turn the temperature up high so that you get more creativity, more variability. But that means sometimes it stops real quick, and sometimes it just keeps rambling. So what I did is I just did a real quick while true loop, and so it'll generate stories. And if the length of the story is greater than 1,000 characters and less than 2,000, that's kind of the sweet spot. So then, let's see. It might be taking a minute. I wonder if it's... Oh, whoops. Oh, wait, no. It should be generating them. So, looks like no. There we go. Yeah. That should be good. Is it filling up? Stories. There we go. So it took a minute. But again, this is what happens when you have high temperature. So I'll go ahead and pause it, and we'll be right back. Okay, so now we've got 10 stories that are pretty good. Let's see, small town in North Africa. So there seems to be a strong preference for North Africa. I can do a little bit of work on balancing the mix. There's also a strong preference in this batch for trends. So let me just show you real quick how I generated those. It's not that I am trying to bias the system, but let's see. We open. So there's 3 sexual orientations. So heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. Figure that's good enough to cover the whole spectrum. At least throwing a big blanket over it. And then for gender expression, there's cis male, female, trans male, female, genderqueer male, female, and non-binary male, female. That might be too much. I don't know. But again, the goal is to make sure that every major group gets representation. And that's the point. Is it's super easy. You just if you want to do experiments, you come in and update these trait profiles and then rerun the generate personas, because that's what it does. It takes education, occupation, religion, that sort of thing, homeschooling, so whatever skill level, that, and so on and so forth. Okay, so point is, we've got a bunch of stories. And genetic population. Did I forget India? I totally forgot India. That is a huge genetic population. Indian. So again, I'm not perfect. This is just like figuring it out as I go. All right. So, but, whoops, I should not have closed that. So we've got stories. We've got 10 stories. So now let's automate the part where we're trying to get issues. So we're going to get, so we'll do topic responses. We'll just call it topics. And I'll go ahead and pause it again because this will just take a little bit of scripting to plug and play a prompt. And you don't need to see that. Okay, we're just about ready. So let me grab this prompt and I'll just show you what it does. All right, so this prompt is: I'm confronted with a question or issue and I must write how I feel about it. I'll write a long, extensive opinion about this topic. So then we come and grab a story. So we'll grab a random story. Born in a small town in the middle of nowhere. I stumbled upon a book about trans. Okay, so again, same curious person, and then we'll get the topic, which I am going to do the abortion one because this is a hot issue, especially in, well, many places. Okay, so then we still have the high temperature, detailed essay on how I feel about this. So this, you'll frequently get like, I'm opposed to this bill. Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. But so that we have an opinion, we have a feeling, but we need a little bit more. We also need like, what are the specific concerns? Because part of consensus is you have to surface all of the actual objective issues, right? Like what are the key things? What are the detailed concerns? And it often has to come out as a conversation. I don't know if I'm going to get to conversation this time because we're already at 30 minutes or so. But at least I want to get this far, and then try and decompose each position a little bit more. Okay, so I like this, but let's see. Instead of feelings, because emotions are critical, people's emotional disposition is a part of consensus. But now we have to be objective. I'm confronted with a question or issue, and I must write about, let's see, write out my specific, objective, concrete concerns. What are the material consequences or issues involved? Okay, so now we're going to change the prompt pretty dramatically. Detailed essay on my concrete concerns. Okay, so now let's see how this changes. We're leaving everything else the same. Okay. Force many women into poverty. Yep. Okay. Cool. So we can have this prompt that just says, okay, what are the objective concerns here? So let's go ahead and save this out. And we'll do profile. I did not mean to delete that. Do profile and topic. And so theoretically, with a little bit of fine tuning and prompt engineering, because so fine tuning, how I would approach this is I'd get real stories from real people and their opinions. You'd probably need, you'd need a lot of diversity in the fine tuning data, but you get enough stories about real people and their takes on these issues. And then the model will generalize and be able to realize like, okay, we need to take someone's life story into account when doing this. Okay, so we'll say topic, let's see, concrete. Okay, there we go. And then finally, so part is brainstorming, right? A big part of consensus is there's how you feel about it. There are your objective concerns, but then there's also the creative part, the reaching forward and what's called bridging, which is like, okay, what are the places that we can find common ground? So here we say, okay, I'm confronted with a issue and I must write out my, so instead of concerns, I must brainstorm ideas about creative solutions to the problem. The goal is to discover, let's see, let's see, I guess areas where, or let's see, discover compromises that can satisfy everyone's needs. So the goal with consensus is not to make everyone happy, but to get to a place where you find something that everyone can live with. Okay, so detailed essay, we'll say, let's see, detailed brainstorm on creative compromises. And so in a formal system, if something like this were to be implemented for helping guide politics or God forbid, to replace politicians, generating ideas is a whole other process. So consensus is broken into several steps, and we're kind of making a shorthand. But again, this video is getting long, and I just want to get at least this far so that you see where I'm going with it. And then once we can, I'll probably work on this a little bit behind the scenes. And once we can reliably generate realistic opinions for, an arbitrary number of people, I'm only doing 10. But the idea here is let's come up with a system that allows us to find compromise and consensus with 10 billion people. That's my goal. Okay. I never think big. Let's see. Okay, so some things is we could negotiate. Another option would be to set up safe, legal, and affordable abortion services in other countries. Therefore, would still be able to access them even if they're banned in my own country. So kind of thinking of a contingency plan. We could also try and educate the public on this importance and safety. Okay. And finally, we could set up underground networks of safe and affordable abortions. Going rogue. I love it. Okay. So we take all of these different aspects of someone's worldview. Let's save this as a thing. Because you know what? If someone is opposed to abortion and they don't know what's happening, does it really hurt them? No, we shouldn't think this way. But part of the thing about consensus is if this were ever to be implemented as a government system, anonymity would be very important, because like you might be talking about an issue that is currently illegal. So say for instance, like I don't smoke pot, but I believe that it should be fully legal, because all the science indicates that marijuana is less dangerous than alcohol in many respects. And I want to, in order to have a safe, effective conversation, I need to trust that, like, if I were to have a conversation with a machine or give my opinions to a machine that's going to, churn and crank out, that data is not going to be used against me later. Because, authoritarian regimes not just do that presently, but have done that forever, is any public records about someone can be used against them. This was a huge thing during the Holocaust, was stuff as simple as library records, land records, deeds, were used to root out undesirable people in Nazi Germany. I'm so glad that I demonetized my own video, because I'm talking about like rape in Nazi Germany and stuff, and like I'd totally get demonetized at this point. But you know what? This is science, and we can't be afraid of taboo topics. So then we'll say topic and we'll say compromise. Okay, so we've got three aspects of some of the conversations that you need to have for consensus. And obviously this is just basic prompt engineering. This is, in order to do this right, we would need to collect, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of these discussions from real people to get real human examples. Fortunately, though, GPT-3 was trained on internet data, which means that it has already read a lot of real human opinions, and that is actually the point of having the story, right? Because it reads someone's story and it'll queue up all of those embeddings about people like that it has already read about, and so we're getting somewhat accurate-ish representations of what someone might actually want or think. Obviously, I'm using the instruct models, and so it's already biased towards a particular data set, which is not ideal. But if I fine-tune the base model, base DaVinci, we'll get rid of that. Anyways, okay, so I think we've got those three prompts. Yeah, so I'll pause it again, and I'll make a third script that will take those stories and this topic. Actually, I've got it here, the generate responses. So I'll just finish fleshing this out, and it will save everyone's opinions. And we'll be right back, and we'll call it a day, because we are at 40 minutes. Okay, so we are running this. Let me show you the script real quick. So it just, very simple, runs those three prompts in serial, where it gets someone's feelings, their concerns, and then asks for compromises. So this is a very shorthand form of consensus. And then it saves it out to worldviews. So we've got, at the start of someone's worldview is structured information where it has their story. So like this is kind of like, this is who the person is. And then here are, there's the worldview is a list of responses to topics. So there's a topic, and then how they feel about it, and the concerns, and then the compromises that they want to do. And so what we'll do is, in the future, when I come back to this, I'll take all of this information and I'll run this for a few more people. The reason I'm only doing it on 10 people is because I don't want to burn through tokens while just testing to make sure that the thing is valid. But really, ultimately, like, I want to do this for, tens of thousands of people. Because then you can really get creative. And what we're doing is we're provoking a lot of creativity from the machine. So yeah, there we go. I think that's about it. I'll just let this finish, but we'll call it a day. And we've got a system now that is taking someone's, their life story and using that to generate their position. And so what we'll do is we have a lot of data. And so then the next thing that we'll do is we will take all of these dispositions and we'll try and find, okay, what's the common ground? Can we have the machine calculate what is the common ground that people can agree on, and what are some creative solutions? And we'll have a machine that takes this as the input and as a very clinical thing, kind of tries to come up with alternatives and proposals. But yeah, thanks for watching. I think we'll call that a day, and have a good one.